Hello, everyone. My name is Eileen Price, and I'm here with Noah Day and Skylar Smith, and we are going to share some information about counseling clients of Arab descent. On this first slide, you'll see the holy city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, and Mecca is the city where the religion of Islam began. Most people in Arab nations are of the Muslim faith, the Islamic religion. However, in America, there's going to be a lot of variety. Arab Americans have a lot of different faiths. The Islamic prophet Muhammad was born in Mecca in 570 AD. He had his first revelation from Allah, God in Arabic, in 610 AD at the age of 40. Those revelations have become what we know today as the Quran, which is the holy book of the Muslim faith. Many Muslims will turn towards Mecca and bow and pray 5 times a day. This slide is going to show you the 22 nations that make up what is called the Arab League. It's a very important event that happened in 1945. 22 Arab nations kind of joined together to form this league. And so they share their political aims, their concerns, they resolve disputes, and they want to protect their sovereignty and they want to protect their independence. So that is what is called the Arab League. This is a list of all the nations that you can see that are in the Arab League. Some of them you may recognize, some of them may be a little unfamiliar, but there are 22 Arab nation states in the Arab League. Next on this slide, there's a very important event that happened in the spring of 2011, and it's called the Arab Spring. Basically, these were pro-democracy uprisings in many large Arab countries like Tunisia, Morocco, Syria, Libya, and Egypt. Some of them were successful, and they ended up doing some regime change in 3 of the countries, and otherwise it was not so successful. The other nations did not have as much success. It was Libya and Egypt and Tunisia were able to have regime change. Like I said before, the majority religion in Arab nations is Islam. However, Arab Americans have a very, very diverse faith. In fact, the majority of Arabs in America are Catholic, followed by Islam, 24%. They also have Christian Orthodox, Christian Protestant, and then 13% have no religious affiliation. Just remember, a Muslim is an adherent of Islam. Islam is a monotheistic Abrahamic religion that originated in Saudi Arabia in the 7th century AD. This slide should give you a lot of pictures of the typical bias and prejudice that exist for the Arab Americans for 9/11 and ISIS. So anyone that's of Arab descent or any Arab Americans, most other Americans will associate them with these things. You see ISIS on the top right, and you see Osama bin Laden. This is what they think women look like, always in a hijab, and you always see the 9/11 pictures. And it's very common for Americans to have stereotypes of Arabs and Muslims before 9/11 and especially after 9/11. For example, all Arabs are villains and terrorists. All Arabs are barbaric. Arab women are oppressed. They wear the hijabs, they always wear veils, and many of them are belly dancers, evidently. All Arab Muslims, and people say all Arabs are Muslims and foreigners, and that's just not true. Here's a little bit of video about Arab myths and stereotypes.
So which desert do you come from? Do you speak Islam? You're Christian? But you're Arab. Jesus wasn't Middle Eastern. Jesus, hello, English name. One of those Arabs? Now you're a good Arab. So how many cousins are you allowed to marry? Wait, are you from Agrabah? Real country, no? Oh, I thought Aladdin was based on a real story. You don't look Arab. Wait, you're not fasting? Wait, aren't you supposed to be fasting? How come you're not fasting? Aren't you supposed to? So you know how to fly a carpet, right? say you're a lesbian? No, Lebanese. Can we get someone with an English name, please? Yeah, I could understand him, man. I think he came from like a race, you know, the races. I don't know. He was like, "That's how I sport English, please." What's Allah? Wait, I thought Iraq and Afghanistan were in the same country. Are you like from Islamistan? Oh, you probably know my friend Ahmed. Your name's Jason? Aren't you Arab? So are you allowed? Are you allowed? In your country, are you allowed? Wait, I thought you weren't allowed. Are women in your country? Yeah, but in the news, yeah, but the media was saying. Ahlan wa sahlan. Thank you guys for watching another Mark Hashim video, breaking down some myths about Arabs with some comedy. Don't forget to share this with people because people need to know. You gotta show them how awesome the Arab world is and break down some myths. Don't forget to subscribe for more content. Leave a comment if you have questions or ideas. نشوفكم. Take care. So, which
Next, we're going to have Skylar Smith talk to us about cultural norms. Skylar?
Yes. So, before working with individuals of Arab descent in a counseling setting, it is of the utmost importance to begin examining their cultural norms. Beginning with their family systems and dynamics, one can see that the role of collectivism is extremely important. And this is the worldview that Arab families typically adhere to. Within this context, family and community have ultimate priority. Instead of becoming more individualistic with age, as many Americans do, Arabs typically continue to strongly identify themselves with their families and communities, and the role of the extended family is also of extreme importance. This type of thinking can be seen displayed in a well-known Arab proverb that states, "We rise together and we fall together." Within this framework, the concept of honor and shame are also incredibly significant, as they directly impact the behaviors, goals, and attitudes of many Arabs as they make decisions. Rather than focusing on their individual needs, they would be more likely to sacrifice their own wants in order to make a good decision for the entire family structure and community surrounding them. Additionally, Arabs follow a patrilineal structure within the family. This should not be misconstrued, though, to assume that women are always dominated by males in Arab cultures. In reality, there are a large amount of different beliefs regarding gender roles, the patriarchy, etc., within Arab cultures. Parenting styles are oftentimes seen as authoritarian here in the US as Arabs immigrate here. The parenting style is actually stricter here in the US and in their home countries because they may view American culture and outside influences as a threat to their value systems, especially if they're Muslims. Parents are also oftentimes a little more strict with their daughters because the honor of the family is tied more specifically to the actions of the daughter than the sons. As for marriage and divorce, both love matches and arranged marriages do occur, and divorce is typically highly frowned upon. So this is also something to keep in mind if counseling Arabs regarding their marital issues. So as a whole, when addressing family matters as a counselor, be sure not to label relationships as unhealthy, inappropriate, or destructive when the relationship has simply been formed on the basis of their cultural framework and expectations. And this is why familiarizing oneself with cultural norms is so important, especially as counselors. So next, we will take a look at religion. Many people often think that all Arabs are Muslims, but actually the majority of Arab Americans here in the US are actually Catholic, and Islam is the second most common religion. One common misconception is that women are oppressed through Islam, but in reality, Islam actually states that both men and women are equal before God. So it's usually political leaders or religious leaders who lead to the oppression that we see. Something else for counselors to consider when working with individuals of Islamic faith would be the use of an imam, because Muslim clients may really greatly appreciate involving an imam in the process of their counseling. Moving on to education, that is something that is also highly valued in this culture. In fact, 40% have college degrees. And many do incorrectly assume that girls within this culture are not encouraged to get an education, but that is simply not true. Both girls and boys are encouraged to get an education, but cultural expectations may still lead to some women working primarily in the home, even if they do have a high level of education. But that is because they are seen as having a very central role in the family and the household. Additionally, it's important to note that some Arabs do lose their professional credentials when they move here to the US. And lastly, in communication, this is also an important factor to familiarize yourself with, especially as a counselor. Nonverbal gestures and hand motions are quite common among this culture. They may also use a loud voice or repetition to emphasize their points, and they are typically accustomed to being in close proximity to those that they are familiar with. Typically, though, they are not always comfortable sharing with those outside of their culture and community, so building good rapport and trust is very, very important. It's also very common for Arabs to begin displaying somatic symptoms as their emotions are expressed through physical symptoms. So that is something to keep in mind as counselors too. Additionally, they may choose not to speak negatively about their family as it relates back to the concept of honor and shame, and women may also be less likely to speak out in public when in the presence of a man. So, if conducting marriage counseling, it may be best to host individual sessions with the man and woman before bringing them together so that the woman has the opportunity to speak openly. And it also may be appreciated by these clients if they are able to be paired up with counselors of their same gender. And next, we'll have Noah explaining the counseling do's and don'ts with this culture.
Yes. Awesome. So some of the things that were previously said, I'll kind of cover as well. And this kind of broke down into things that as counselors we should do and things that we would be discouraged to do. And so the first thing is to become knowledgeable about the Arab culture, because there are a lot of things that you may not know, or you may be operating from certain preconceived notions. And so that was really fun for us three to begin engaging with information that pertained to Arab Americans, because that was something that for me, I didn't know prior to this presentation. And so becoming knowledgeable and knowing the deficits of your education as far as this demographic. And so don't hesitate to ask questions, but be respectful in your curiosity, and allow the client to educate you. And that's for a lot of different cultures and ethnicities. Allow the client to be the teacher, and ask questions that are going to allow them to open up and talk more about themselves. And so if you go to the next slide, one of the things that is really important to remember is the socio-political climate in America, revolving around Arab Americans. And you saw that in some of the previous slides with the stereotypes. Arab Americans might know that these are stereotypes that are oftentimes associated with who they are and their identity. And so they may come into a counseling session already believing that you have and hold those stereotypes. And so remembering that as a counselor is going to be really important. I think it's important to ask Arab American clients about their experiences with negative stereotypes. And that's really going to be a hard part of the counseling session, for two reasons. A, that might just be heavier information, but B, you might have a hard time the client might have a hard time opening up about their personal experiences, as we've seen, as the information presented is that Arab Americans typically will kind of be a little bit more closed off and less inclined to open up to counselors. And so that might be an uphill battle, but do be a part of engaging with their experiences, both negative and positive. Don't assume that Arab American clients feel safe, at ease, and understood by you. That might be what you are operating from as a counselor, is that someone steps into your session and you're making them feel safe in the way that you are carrying yourself, in the way that you're speaking. But be open and honest early on about their perceived concerns about your biases. So kind of talk about that. Don't brush it under the rug, address it. Do expect that some Arabs may communicate with passion. So Skylar had just kind of talked about this as far as some of the cultural norms in communication. And so what we might perceive as being aggressive might simply be the way they communicate. And so understanding that a spike in tone or a volume might not mean anger, might simply mean excitement. And so we have to understand that there might be a cultural layer to the way that they communicate. Don't assume that their communication style is due to them being aggressive or angry, like I just said. And then don't assume that all Arabs are Muslims or speak Arabic. Do remember that Arab Americans may have anxiety about sharing personal issues, which is why I had said that it might take some time for them to begin opening up about their negative experiences with stereotypes. Mental health care may have a negative stigma attached for Arabs. I know that there are other cultures that don't value mental health, don't value counselors. It's a taboo topic. And so Arab Americans may engage with counselors in the same way. Don't get ahead of the client. I know it might be exciting to begin to dig and begin to process and take steps towards recovery, but be patient and slow in that process. It says that on the slide that it may be off-putting by asking all these insightful based questions early on in the treatment. And so increased client self-awareness and change may cause family discord. And so be slow in that process and expect that they may open up much later on in treatment and in session. Do explore with Arab American clients about acculturative stressors. And so you see a list there, some language barriers, educational differences, losing professional and educational credentials. They may have been a well-known, accredited, highly valued employer in their home country and coming to the United States, but they may not have those same credentials. And so understanding that they may be operating from a place of discomfort is going to be really helpful. They may have lower employment offers, social and moral values of a new culture, and then adjusting to food, clothing, and religious differences. Don't assume the Arab American clients and their family with several generations are all adjusting to the same American culture in the same way. So one family member might be adjusting differently than the other, and it's important to understand those dynamics and discuss those differences. So the last do's and don'ts: do discuss with the Arab American client their treatment goals and a variety of treatment options. So be open about that process. Bringing them in is going to be really helpful. Do explain and consider the utilization of CBT, solution-based pragmatic interventions. That'll be really important. In the book, these were some of the treatments that were most effective with this group and will be helpful to utilize during sessions. Bring family, community leaders, trusted individuals, and imams in if appropriate. They're very collectivistic, and so bringing in a lot of people who they consider close to them will be helpful. And then lastly, don't impose Western biases or force a specific approach. So be teachable, allow the client to teach you and inform you on how best to care for them. And so we'll kind of close with a statement, and it was, Skylar, are you wanting to take this over?
We can just go ahead and talk about what Jesus was talking about in his passage in Mark 12:29-31, you know, the greatest commandment. And then he said, the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. So, excuse me. I think as counselors, and we're dealing with people with all different ethnic diversities, they're very different than ourselves. And I think Jesus gives us this command: love your neighbor as yourself. And I think that's just a great way to treat your clients, serve your clients well as counselors. Just always keep that in mind. To love them as yourself, because we are going to run into people that are very different than ourselves, and it may be difficult at times, but I think that if we just keep this in mind as a major tenet of how we treat everybody, including our clients in counseling. So that's what I think, that's why we've included that slide, sort of an inspiration for each counselor to remember that, especially as we're being multiculturally competent in our counseling. We just definitely need to, whether we're, these are going to be Arab clients, they're going to be, maybe they're Christian, maybe they're Muslim. So with our actions and our words and the way we treat them, we can be Christ-like without having to impose our values and biases on them as counselors. So we just want to keep that in mind.